Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to talk about some of the longest and most intimidating books on my TBR. So recently I've done a couple of videos around the longest books that I've read, but now I want to talk about the longest ones that I still want to read or am planning to read sometime soon. So I kind of wanted to order these by like least to most intimidating, but I couldn't decide. So I've just gone from shortest to longest, even though it doesn't necessarily align with least to most intimidating, because sometimes there's other things in there that are making them more intimidating than just the length. Anyway, let's get into talking about some of these scary books. If you have read any of these, I would love to give me some reassurance down in the comments. Or if you've read them and hated them, like, scare me off, please. Please scare me off these books if that's what you think is necessary. So at number 10, we have the Earthsea series by Ursula K. Le Guin. So I have read The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm not sure if I've read anything else by her, but the Earthsea books are some kind of classics, I think. No, I can tell for definite there are dragons involved. I don't really know much more about it, but I've heard mostly good things about it. I do follow some people who did try to pick it up once as a read-along, and they said they found the writing quite unreadable, and it definitely is an older series. Like 1968, it says here, the first book was published, so that's a little bit scary. So it's not just the length of this. This is only the first 4 books. There's, I think, another like short story, maybe not so short story anthology, and then another book as well. So it's kind of long, but maybe not that long. I think what scares me the most about this is whether the writing style is going to do it for me or not. Okay, I just read the synopsis because I felt bad for not giving you any idea of what it's about. It seems like there's a young boy sent to an island to learn magic, and as I said, I assume dragons. Then, next on the list is actually another series by Ursula K. Le Guin, and that is The Hainish Cycle. So, The Left Hand of Darkness that I mentioned before is actually the 4th book in the Hainish Cycle. I think the Hainish Cycle, the idea is that it's just a bunch of like vaguely interconnected stories of like some kind of advanced civilization exploring other planets, and Ursula K. Le Guin basically using this as a way of exploring different like ideas about civilization and society. And I think actually most of the books can be read completely independently, like it doesn't need to be read as a series, and I'm not even sure that there's any benefit to reading it as a series, but there are definitely books within that series that I've heard really great things about. And so I think I want to read the whole series, but maybe I should just be picking individual books instead of reading the whole series. I'm not sure. If you've read some or all of the Hainish Cycle, I would love to know your opinion on the best way of approaching it. But I think I want to try the whole thing. Maybe I should be less of a completionist. Then we have the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. Is that the right pronunciation, the right name? I'm not sure. This is a very popular series. I haven't watched the TV show or played any of the games, but I have read the first chapter of the first book, The Last Wish, and I was very intrigued about the story. I've definitely heard mixed things about this one, and I think because it's a translation that there probably are bits which are a little bit hard to read or hard to get through. And so maybe this is another series where I shouldn't be feeling like I need to take on the whole series. I should just be picking a little bit. Like, is there a part in the series where it peaks and then there's no point continuing? That would certainly make it easier if there was. I've just had a quick look on Goodreads and the average rating seems to stay high, so I guess not. Oh, also, maybe I should make an attempt at a synopsis. It's a popular series, so probably a lot of you know better than me, but mainly we're following Geralt, who is like a monster hunter. Actually, I think maybe we're not primarily following him, but we're definitely getting a decent amount of him just going and taking on different monsters. Maybe. Honestly, maybe this video should just be called Correct Me on what the books on my TBR are actually about. Anyway, next on the list we have Mission Earth by L. Ron Hubbard. So I mainly have this on my TBR because I got this first book in the series from a little free library. So if you don't know, L. Ron Hubbard is the creator of Scientology, and before I think he created Scientology, he also wrote this sci-fi book series. And this is another one where I have tried the first chapter and I I wasn't expecting to like it. I thought, some crazy guy who's created a religion, what are the chances that his book is actually good? And admittedly, on Goodreads, the average ratings for the whole series are terrible, like 3.43, I think. However, I read the beginning and it was so interesting the way it was written. It starts with like a translator's preface where it's clear that this book is going to be about some kind of incident that happened on Earth. And the translator, I think, is kind of saying like, you know what, I've kind of forgotten. I shouldn't pretend like I remember properly. No, I think I remember enough to tell you that it's like these aliens don't really believe that Earth or humans could be real. So it's prefacing this book with saying this is definitely fiction, but in a way that makes you think it's not fiction. And then I think after we get the translator, we get something from the censorship office basically saying there's no way this could have happened, but like, here's the story. So it seems like something happened. These aliens encountered some humans and they were supposed to just kill the humans off after that so that there would be no record of what happened, but they didn't. And then this is the story of what actually happened. Anyway, the whole framing of it was really interesting and kind of like a mix of seriousness and humor that I really liked. And also, I just want to read this because I'm curious about what the creator of Scientology might have written. Now this, though, is a 10-book series. So 10 books of about this size is scary. However, I think what I'm going to do, like I've already kind of made this decision for myself, is I'm just going to commit to reading this first book, which I already have. I've heard or I've seen written somewhere that the rest of the books in this series are just kind of the same story but written from different perspectives and that they're not as good. So maybe if I just read this first one, I won't feel the need to continue, even though I'm a completionist. That's my hope, that I can let go of that completionist feeling for just a little bit. Then we have The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. I have this first book. I wish I had those really pretty editions, but this is one that I think, once again, I got in a little free library. If not, I only paid a couple of dollars for it. Does it make it less intimidating to have gotten a book for very cheap? I think it does. I think it does. So the Dandelion Dynasty is 4 books, I think, that are at least this size. Some of them are even bigger, so that's somewhat overwhelming. And even though I, once again, tried the first chapter and I did enjoy it, also it seemed like it was going to be a lot. I think maybe you can tell from the word dynasty in the series title that this is kind of going to be a big sprawling epic fantasy with a lot of like cultural and political details to it, I think. Actually, I can't even begin to give you a synopsis of this, but I've heard so many great things about it and I really did like that first chapter that I really hope I'm going to love this. Which does help to make it a little bit less intimidating. Next on my list is one that I feel like is more of an obligation read, and maybe I just shouldn't even go there, and that is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. Now, I have really liked some things by Stephen King, and a lot of people say that this is a really great fantasy series. However, once again, I tried the first chapter and it wasn't really doing anything for me. But because this series is so hyped and because I have liked some things by King before, I want to give it a go. Once again, do I even know what the series is about? Not really. The first book kind of just starts with a guy chasing another guy through the desert, but never being able to catch up to him. And I'm sure that there is more to it than that. I sometimes find it's hard with these kind of books because I want to know what it's about, but I also don't want to find out too much because I feel like then that might spoil it. So if you think there's something about the Dark Tower series that would make me more excited and less intimidated to read it, because I think this is another one that's quite long. I mean, I'm halfway up the list now. I'm ordering these in length, so like, it's quite long, which makes it scary. But if there's anything you could tell me that would make it less scary or like make it more intriguing, that would be really helpful. Then we have The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, and I'm actually combining this with the other trilogy, I think it's called Of Blood and Bone, because I believe they're all set in the same world, and that this is like a kind of a Viking-inspired, once again, sprawling epic fantasy. I think fairly grimdark as well. Now, I know some people really love this series, and I am going to pick it up very soon because I want to participate in Becca in the Books' read-along that she's doing with that series, starting now and continuing for the rest of next year. So I do think reading this as a read-along helps to make it feel a little bit less intimidating, but once again, it's a long series And because I'm a completionist, I think this is part of why I get so scared. Because I'm a completionist, once I start a series, it's hard for me to give up on it, especially if it's one that's really hyped. And I feel like I'm going to be missing out on conversations if I don't read it. But also, like, I have heard enough good things about this that I think I could like it. I hope so. Okay, then let's take a quick break because I want to talk about a series that I'm not really that intimidated by, even though if I'm sorting by length, this is where it would go in the ordering. So it's a fairly long series. However, I think it helps because each of the books is not very long. So this is the Mercy Thompson series. So it's like a kind of a paranormal romance, supernatural type story following this woman who I think is kind of a shapeshifter type person in a world with like werewolves and vampires and all that stuff. And the Fae, I think the Fae are going to play a decent part in this series when I get to it. And I'm not too scared of this one because I think I can pick it up on audiobook and enjoy it that way. Also, each book is pretty short, so like I can consume this one in nice digestible bites. So not so scary. But then much more scary is The Expanse by S.A. Corey. So this is like a sprawling space opera murder mystery type story, I think. Each of the books are pretty decently sized and there are quite a lot of books in the series. And again, another one I tried the first chapter of, and while I did enjoy the prologue, the main character in the first chapter, I'm just not sure if he's going to be someone that I enjoy going on a journey with. I'm not actually sure though whether the book series like sticks with him or whether we get to follow some different characters. I mean, it's a long series, so one would hope you're not just stuck with one guy the whole time. I think I'm mostly just scared for this one for how long the series is. Then we have the Rhyria books by Michael J. Sullivan. So this is a really long series, although I have heard that you could probably skip the Rhyria Chronicles and just read Revelations and what's the other series called? Legends of the First Empire. So these are kind of like two interconnected stories. I think one is in the future and one is in the past, although both of them are like more like fantasy type stories. And then I believe the Chronicles just kind of give you the backstory of a couple of your characters and are more like just nice to have. So that's what I've heard. This is another one where Joshana is going to be doing a read along for this series. So I think I might make it a little bit less intimidating by firstly not committing to reading the Chronicles, but also reading it with a read along, which will hopefully make it like a little bit easier. And I do think as well, I decided to try this one on audiobook. Once again, I haven't said what the series is about, and I don't really know is why. But Joshana loves it, so that's enough for me to be willing to give it a go. Okay, we're up to our top 2 most intimidating books that I want to read. So next we have Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. So this is a massive series. I think there's 10 books and they're all quite thick. This one maybe doesn't look too thick, but the font, of course, is tiny. And this is just like some kind of epic fantasy. I have read the first chapter of this, and it seemed like there was some kind of prohibition of magic and then a corresponding pushback on that going to be happening. But it's 10 books, so I imagine there's a lot more happening than that. The writing is pretty dense and slow. Kind of fine, but just I didn't feel that invested in the characters from the first chapter I read. But I'm probably going to give this one also a go on audiobook. I don't know. If you've read Malazan, I would love to know whether you think it's worth it. I see so many people talking about this one that I feel like I'm missing out, but like, am I? Maybe I shouldn't even bother. I'm just not sure if I'm going to like it. And I feel like because it's such a slow book series, and also like I think I've heard doesn't get good until like book 4 or 5. So like, do I have to read the first 5 books before I decide whether I want to continue or not? That sounds like we're going down the route of the Dresden Files, where I read most of the series and then decided that was a waste of time for me. Although I don't necessarily regret it because now when I see people talking about the Dresden Files, I know what they're talking about. So maybe we'll do the same thing with Malazan. Maybe it'll be worth it. Okay, now let's talk about the most intimidating, and that is the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. And I think the reason I'm the most intimidated by this is not the fact that there's like 40 something books, because I have seen you can kind of break it down into different little sections, and so I can read it a section at a time and decide to kind of not bother at any point if I decided I didn't want to. But what I think I'm actually more intimidated about is that this is a series that so many people love. But I do remember trying one of these, I think in high school, maybe university actually. And I didn't get it. I was completely confused the whole time. I thought it was just nonsense. I didn't get the humor. Now, University Penny was a long time ago, so we can't necessarily assume that her experience will be me now's experience, but it could be. And I think these books lean a lot into the humor, and I don't always do well with humor in books, so am I going to do well with this series? I don't know. If you have read any of the Discworld books, I would love to know what your experience with them has been, and especially if you haven't liked them, like let me know why you haven't liked them, and then maybe I can decide if that's making them worse for me. Am I trying to make these books more intimidating for me, or am I trying to make them less intimidating? I honestly don't know. Probably both, because if they get more intimidating, maybe I'll just quit. But if they get less intimidating, then that's not so bad either. Anyway, if you have read any of the books that I've talked about in this video, I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Or also, if you have ever considered reading any of these, let me know what are the most intimidating for you. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.